Hello, everyone. My name is Jamila Rizvi, and I'm an author, and most importantly, I am a mum based here in Melbourne, in Victoria. And this is my friend Claire Tonti. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Jam. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really
Oh,
excited.
Claire, it is such a pleasure to be with you. And you and I spend so much time together talking about our kids anyway. And today we get to do it in just a slightly more formal capacity, which is fun. But before we get our conversation underway, I do want to acknowledge that both you and I today are broadcasting from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. I also think it's worth recognising that First Nation stories are now appropriately celebrated in Victorian kinders, which is really special. One of the things I loved when my little boy Ruffy was at kinder was that he would come home with stories that he had either been read or been told by First Nations elders who had visited his kindergarten. And they were often things I had not heard before, because you and I grew up in an era where First Nation stories weren't celebrated the way that they should have been.
Yeah, completely. And there's such beautiful work that early years educators are doing now in the classroom. I was speaking to some of my friends. I used to be a primary school teacher, so I'm not early years trained exactly, but I know lots of people who are, and they're doing such beautiful work. And there's one beautiful thing that they're doing across classrooms. Can I read it?
Yeah, please.
Great. So what they do, because kids are really all about themselves, and we know that, right? We know we have two kids. It's all about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so to bring that acknowledgement of country into relevance for them and to centre them as well, they say this little phrase. So it goes, you have to do it with me, Jam. You have to point to the land. Okay. So you go, here is the land, down.
Here is the land.
Here is the sky.
Here is the sky.
Here are my friends.
Here are my friends.
Oh, here is my friend. And here am I.
And here am I. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's cute, isn't it? And I just think exactly right. It's so beautiful that they're bringing that into the classroom in a real way, because it's an incredibly important thing to teach our kids from really early on.
So I know your kids very, very well, but the people listening do not necessarily. So we're not going to use their names or anything, but maybe using their ages. Can you tell us a little bit, give us a flavour of your children, Claire?
Sure, absolutely. So I've got two. I've got Mr. 6 and Miss 2. And I'll say I've got two very opposite kids. I've got an introvert who's very deeply thinking and very cautious, needs to make sure that the pool is inspected for sharks before he gets in, and needs a lot of time before he enters situations, but loves it once he jumps in. The other one, Miss 2, is the complete opposite, super adventurous, super social, loves being around people, loves to dance, loves to be in front of a crowd, and is really, really sensory. So she loves to be in the natural world, in the sandpit, in the mud, in the pool. So that's my two that I've got. What about you? You've got beautiful Ruffy.
I do. So Ruffy has just turned 7, and he's a kid that likes to do the cool stuff at school, or the things that are considered cool, right, at that age. So he plays a lot of footy, he plays basketball, he's a real one of the boys when he's at school, but secretly he's just not at all. He loves his ballet, he loves his tap dancing, he loves his jazz, he loves escaping into like a make-believe universe, which is something he does a lot with your son. And that's, I think, where his real happy place is. And I find that so interesting, because even at 7, you know, I've got this kid who's got that ability to mask, I think, to mask his true interests, because he knows that's what people expect of him. And that most makes me really impressed and really sad sometimes.
Oh, I know. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that shows he's got such great social efficacy, right? That he can do that and work in different ways, which is a skill we need in adulthood, which is what kids learn through play, actually, which is kind of what we're talking about now, right?
But Claire, we're here today because we are here to talk about the fact that from 2023, free kindergarten programs are going to be available for all Victorian 3 and 4-year-old children at all the participating services, which as parents, we know is, I've got to say, and I hate that my brain goes there first, but I straight away go, well, that's a saving, right? Like, because early childhood education and childcare is expensive, and having free kindergarten available for that extra year is going to be up to $2,500 per child per year, and that is going to make a massive difference. So over the next 10 years, Claire, 4-year-old kindergarten is going to transition to kind of like a pre-prep. So obviously we all use different languages in different states and territories, right? It gets awfully confusing if you've got a kid who's moving around the country, or in my case, if you're talking to grandparents who are in a different part of the country. But here in Victoria, we call the first year of school prep, and we call the year before it kindergarten or kinder. And over the next 10 years, as I was saying, 4-year-old kindergarten will become pre-prep, which will increase to a universal 30 hours per week program of play-based learning. And so here is my question for you. We use the phrase play-based learning all the time. And sometimes I'm not sure if I know what it means.
You wouldn't be alone, absolutely, because we sort of think about play and we think, we've seen that before. We know what our kids do. We know how to play. But play-based learning is different. And I'll kind of direct people to someone called Kathy Walker, who's a real expert in this field. She's written so many books, one of which is called Play Matters. But she talks just in such beautiful language about the gift first of play and how important it is for our kids to give them the space to do that. But play-based learning is more than that. It's sort of intentionally setting up centres and opportunities for children to play in an open-ended way to follow their interests and curiosity. So it's kind of like what I was talking about before. It's not just kind of plonking down some colouring in stuff, setting out some dinosaurs, there's some Lego and you'll be fine. You know, it really is a highly skilled way of educating children. But we know in those first 5 years, they don't need to learn to read yet. They don't need to learn math sums and all this kind of, really serious stuff. What they need is opportunities to follow their creativity and imagination, and it's incredibly important. So play-based learning is also a way for kids to take risks and explore their boundaries, and it's also about experiencing things that happen in the real world in a safe way. So you might have noticed that they like playing mums and dads, or cooking dinner, or becoming a fireman, or, running away from a monster, or entering into a battle. All of those things are ways of kids experimenting and understanding their world in a safe space and just trying out different ways of being, so that when they come to the real world, they've kind of had experience already in those kinds of areas. It also helps them to develop their fine and gross motor skills. And under all of this is oral language, which is the basis of everything, particularly in terms of language acquisition, but literacy and reading and writing and really all school outcomes when they get to school. I think it's also important to note that emotions play a big part in all of this. And if kids have been through really traumatic things, or even just little difficulties, friendship difficulties, if home is a little bit unstable or something's happened in their life that's upset them, play is a way for them to process all of that. And I think particularly during COVID, I noticed that with my own kids when they had to get a vaccination. Giving a vaccination with a prop to a doll helps them to, feel like they have some autonomy over their life and also understand the things that have happened to them. So play is such a powerful tool for kids' emotional health, really. I think sometimes we can dismiss play as not very serious, but actually it's the serious work of childhood.
Yeah, no, that really helps, because I see it really clearly in Ruffy, and have the last few years of his life, where he will come to me and be like, Mum, I'm bored. Can I watch TV? And I'll be like, no, you can't watch TV. You got to find something to do. You got a million toys. Come on, find something to do. And if he pushes past boredom for a few minutes and finds play and finds something that is joyous, he will then immerse himself in it 4 hours. And often I don't know what's happening anymore in his little head, but there's either toys moving around, or he's doing voices for people, or he's escaped into a world that I don't know about, which makes sense, right? Because that is learning, because I haven't put that world in his head. That is something he is creating for himself. And we would meet with experts time and time again who would tell us that 90% of brain development, and probably more, happens in the first 5 years of life. And I reckon when I used to hear that in all those meetings, I kind of go, oh, interesting, yeah. But there was a little voice in the back of my head that went, 90%? I reckon I've learnt more since I was 5. I don't know if you've quite got that right. But then when I had Ruffy and I watched him, particularly through those early years between sort of 1 and 5, makes perfect sense. Like the pace with which his little brain and his world were expanding was just Like, it was so rapid.
Their brains are so stretchy and malleable at that age in those first 5 years. And it's just so vital that they have so much time to talk with their caregivers. So with their parents and with you, and reading especially is incredibly important for that. Not teaching them to read, but teaching them about story, about language patterns, about music, about art, about the way that different situations happen, even immersing them in things like the zoo and the beach, because all of those things are building up really lovely connections that they'll draw upon later on.
I think also our attitudes as a community have changed in this space massively. Like, I think if you went back 30 years, right, most people thought about early childhood education as babysitting, right? You got childcare because you needed some babysitting, and it wasn't that different to getting the 16-year-old girl who lived on the corner to come over and look after your kids. Whereas now, after another few decades of education as a community and research and understanding, and also recognizing the training that is required for an early childhood teacher, I think the community gets it now. And I think that means there's going to be some real excitement in the community around these reforms. You know, yes, I think we often look at government numbers and announcements and we kind of go, oh yeah, that's good. But like, this is massive. Like, another year of early childhood education is going to represent an enormous social, economic, and educational reform. And we're going to look back we probably won't even be around, Claire, right? But we will look back in 50, 60, 70 years at this sort of reform and say, we saw the impact, not just in those early years, but as those kids moved through school, as they moved into workplaces, because that learning, as simple as it sounds, that play-based learning will stay with them for life.
The Murdoch Children's Institute is doing some really interesting research into this as well. And it's shown that actually having really good quality early years education for 2 years leads to better school outcomes. It leads to better social outcomes. It leads to kids who feel more confident being ready for school and entering into school. And we know, and Kathy Walker writes about this in her book, Ready, Set, Go as well, that being ready for school is not about academics. It's actually about social and emotional resilience.
And I suppose it just goes back and really doubles down on the fact that an additional year of kinder can be life-changing for a whole bunch of kids, especially those kids who haven't had that socialization opportunity at home and haven't had perhaps as much learning time with their parents at home. I think early childhood education is a great equalizer. It means all kids get the opportunity to start school with a level of knowledge and understanding of the environment they're going into, so they're not scared or frustrated or worried by the situation. But Claire, you've been in early childhood settings before, and you worked in the Kimberleys for a while at an Indigenous school. Tell me about seeing kids start school and knowing which kids had attended kinder and which kids hadn't. Could you see the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the such a special time. I worked in a community up at the very top of the Kimberleys in a little place called Columbo, and it was my first experience watching kinder teachers at work. So it was a First Nations community school, and I got to work with this beautiful teacher, Sue McMillan, who'd been working in the industry for 30 years. And the way that she set up her classroom was such an insight for me. Before that, I'd sort of thought, oh, kinder, that's some fun. But I really thought the serious learning happens once they start prep. I'm a primary school teacher. I'm trained that way. But watching these kids come in and the gentle way that she taught them about their environment, introduced them to all kinds of different things. You could tell the kids that had been attending Sue's kinder classroom, because when they came to school already, they understood how the routines worked. They understood more carefully how to interact with each other. They had better oral language skills as well, and it meant that they were ready to take on new knowledge and to start to learn to read and to write.
So part of this statewide rollout of 3-year-old kinder is going to actually start now in 2022, Claire. So there's going to be 3-year-old kinder available at 2,700 services across Victoria. So that's going to be, I don't know, I'm not good at maths. That's tens of thousands of children, right, who are already benefiting. Next year, the program hours are going to start to vary from service to service, which I think will be really good. It'll mean families get between 5 and 15 hours of this additional 3-year-old kinder every week. And all of this is part of a campaign called Best Start, Best Life. And you and I have been talking about the kids, as we should. But of course, there are huge benefits of early childhood education and care that extend beyond the children themselves. We know that it means that parents are able to work, and women in particular can pursue their own economic security. Early childhood education has been shown to be a contributor to closing the gender pay gap and meaning that women have more superannuation later in life.
I just think that early years education is such a beautiful space to work in. I don't know if you could tell, but I get really excited about talking about it. Just, you get to turn up every day and spend time with these little humans. It's such a privilege. They can take you on little adventures. You get to be curious about the world. You get to sing. You get to put on great dramatic plays. You get to learn about our First Nations history. And it's just an absolutely joyful, special place to work. And so I totally recommend, if someone's thinking about it, to absolutely jump on board and find out more, because it's such a special thing to be a part of these kids' lives.
Yeah. And on top of that, there are some financial incentives that are going to be made available for those who are wanting to upskill into a career in early childhood teaching. So the government's really putting the work in to make this as doable as possible. I want to be a little bit self-indulgent for a moment and just do a massive thank you to the teachers and educators who have made a difference in my life and in my son's life. I was really unwell when my son was in 3-year-old and 4-year-old kinder. I was battling a brain tumor and having a lot of surgery and radiation during that period. And we really needed stability in my kid's life outside of the home, because at that time we couldn't give him a lot of stability. And that came from his kinder teachers, who were so kind to the whole family, to be honest, but they were also really committed to making sure that there was routine and sort of predictability about his schooling environment when home was quite unpredictable. And I really credit them for how well he has come through from a mental health perspective. Claire, you're the one coming to this conversation with the knowledge of someone who's trained as a teacher. If there's parents or guardians out there who are not sure if their kids are ready for kindergarten yet, how do they figure that out?
I know, it's really tricky, isn't it? So there's some places that they can go to find out more. If your child was born between the 1st of May 2019 and the 30th of April 2020, they will be eligible for this program in 2023. And parents can use the kindergarten starting age calculator, which can be found on vic.gov.au/kinder, to find out when to enrol their child. And we'll put links to all of these below as well. You can also use the Find a Kinder program tool to find out which services are near you, or to talk to your local childcare or kinder service about enrolling. And look for programs with the Kinder tick, which indicates the program is led by a qualified teacher, funded and approved by the Victorian Government, complies with government guidelines and the National Quality Framework. To find out more about 3-year-old kinder and how to enrol your child, you can head to, as I said, vic.gov.au/kinder. And there's also initiatives and programs that increase access and inclusion. There's a link to Early Start Kindergarten and also Koori Kids Shine in the show notes below.
And Claire, you and I have 2 gorgeous boys who are now at school and thriving and having a glorious time. But your daughter, Miss 2, as we're calling her, like, this is all ahead of her, right? So what are your hopes for her when she starts her now 2 years of kinder programs?
First off, I can't believe that she's going to be going into kinder. I can't believe that's happened. Oh my gosh, it's going by so fast. Oh, look, she's so social. I'm so excited for her.
She's going to have fun.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I want her to feel safe, right? And excited and curious. I want her to make new friends and be able to experience the world in a way that I can't give her at home, right? And the biggest thing I also want for her is that she's allowed to develop her sense of self and just spend time playing, right? At the end of the day, that's what we want. We want kids to have time playing and developing their oral language and their social efficacy, all of those wonderful things. So I just can't wait to see her. I'm sure she's going to be putting on a lot of costumes I can
Yeah,
already see
she sure is. I think she is absolutely going to thrive. 3-year-old Kinder is going to give her the best start and the best life too.
I'm so excited. Exactly. Thanks so much, Jam.
You too.